All right, let's go ahead and open up our Bibles then to 1 Samuel. I'll move this over just a little bit. 1 Samuel chapter 17. We're not going to move very far from here tonight. We're pretty much sticking in 1 Samuel 17, a little run over to 16. But we've been looking on Sunday nights at no hope. And this is certainly a tactic of Satan, is to get us to the point where we say there is no hope. Because when there is, we believe, no hope, then we tend to quit. Or we get depressed, or we lose faith, we doubt. And we've seen many instances in the Bible where the world would say there is no hope. Or even people at the time said there is no hope. But is there always hope with God? And tonight we're specifically going to look at when you just can't win. And I've noticed with a lot of people, and this is something that we got to work on, is we feel like if we can't win, then why try? Right? Why try? I may fail. Is failure really that big a deal? It really isn't. If you read the Bible, you will realize failure is not that big a deal. People fail all the time. People trip up all the time. People make mistakes all the time. People just outright do terrible things, yet is there always hope? So the fact that you may fail, the fact that you may not win should not keep us from trying. And even when it looks like there is no way you can possibly win, should we quit? Or should we say, let's do it? Let's do it. So let's do it. Let's look at the story. Let's all go to 1 Samuel chapter 17, and this is one of the great you can't win stories. It is David and Goliath. There is no bigger. In fact, we still use it today. In common culture, we use it as an example of when the one who can't win, can't possibly win, because the giant, the opponent, is just too big and too good, and then David beats what? Goliath, right? And it's still today used for that because that is the situation where people said, we cannot win. Nobody can beat Goliath. Nobody can possibly go one-on-one with Goliath. He is too big, he is too strong, he is too mean, he's too ugly. I don't know if he was too ugly or not. I'm just throwing that one in there. But he's too fortified, he has too big of weapons. There is no way one-on-one anybody could ever go against Goliath and win. Therefore, what? Let's not even try. But is that the way we should think as Christians? That there is no way to win? No, because with God, is there always a way? In fact, let's go take a look at the story. Let's go to 1 Samuel chapter 17. We'll start in verse 1 right at the beginning. Now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle and were gathered together in Shochoh, which belongeth to Judah, and pitched between Shochoh and Azekah in Ephes-Dammim. And those are absolutely perfect pronunciations of every single of those words. As far as anybody knows. I have no idea. But you can read it. Verse 2. And Saul. Now Saul is who? The king. Why was Saul chosen to be king by God? Because he was tall, big, a warrior. Somebody people can look up to. Somebody people can be inspired to when you go into battle, right? And here we have King Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together and pitched by the valley of Elah, and set the battle in array against the Philistines. So they went out to fight. They were not intimidated by the Philistines per se. They came and they said, okay, you're on that side of the valley, we're on this side of the valley, we are ready to battle. But then this happened, verse 3. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on the one side, and Israel stood on the mountain on the other side, and there was a valley between them. And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. And everybody can calculate that very quickly and find out he was about 9 feet tall. Now, is that big? Now, I've never stood next to Shaquille O'Neal, but I would feel very small next to him. He's 7'1", somewhere around there. Can you imagine somebody 2 feet taller and just as built, just as big, we're not talking about a new bowl here, just a string bean, small, fragile human being who's just over tall. We're talking about a gigantic man who is 9 feet tall. That is a big, big man. And he's standing out there in the valley, and I'm sure they had no trouble seeing them. There was no like, who's that little guy down there? No. It was like, who's that giant guy who fills the valley down there? There's a massive man, and he is the champion of the Philistines named Goliath, who was 9 feet tall, about. Verse 5, and he had a helmet of brass upon his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass. I would hazard to guess very few of us could even lift his chainmail, and he's doing what with it? Fighting with it, running with it, hanging out with it. He's a strong man, isn't he? Verse 6, and he had greaves of brass upon his legs, big metal shields on his legs, and targets of brass between his shoulders. And the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam. Just gigantic. He probably has huge hands, just massive hands. Just grab that thing. And his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and one bearing a shield went before him. So in spite of just him, he also had somebody helping. And how did I be that guy, just carrying his shield? How big must his shield have been? Just carrying his shield out there. And he had this thing. And basically that head of the spear was about the size of a 16-pound bowling ball. How many have ever been bowling? How many have ever picked it is the heaviest bowling ball you'll find in any alley. And picking that, can you imagine picking that up and throwing it overhand? But with a weaver's beam attached to it, which more than doubles the weight of the thing, and chucking that at somebody. That's how big this man was. And if anybody here, look me in the eye right now, Daniel, I know you're big, I know you're tough, but would you say, yeah, I'll take him? He's thinking, how many guns can I have? No, swords and spears, shields and armor, that's all you've got. How many of us would even dare to take on a guy like that? I know Derek's always looking for a fight, but I don't think that's the one he would want. It's like taking on a grizzly bear, hand to hand, who happens to have weapons and chainmail and shields. And so this is the opponent. This is the challenge. Verse 8. And he stood and cried unto the armies of Israel and said unto them, why are you come out to set your battle array? Am I not a Philistine, and you servants to Saul? Choose you a man from you, and let him come down to me. Let's not all fight. Let's not all come out. You send your champion, and I will fight with them. Verse 9. If he, your champion, be able to fight with me and to kill me, then will we be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us. That's the challenge. And what did every single member of the Israelite army, including King Saul, say? I'm not even going to try. I am not going down there. I'm not raising my hand. I'm not even going to look at him. I'm not even going to pretend that I'm listening to him for fear that he may call me out, right? Because we can't do it. There's no way to win. So we're not going to even try. Verse 10, and the Philistines said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. When Saul and all Israel heard those words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly what? They were afraid. They feared, and they said, we need not even try. Then along comes who? Little David. Now he had brothers who were in the military there. And in fact, David had been working in the palace for Saul, playing instruments for him. In fact, he had to go back because they were going to war. He had to go back home to help with the sheep because the brothers were going to war and things like that. So he had to go back, but Saul knew him. He'd been around. His brothers were there. And yet, what did his brothers, who were older and bigger, what did they say when they saw this challenge? Let's what? Don't even try. We cannot win. So they said there is no what? Hope. There's no hope of taking him on. And they refused to fight. Well, David comes along. His father wants to send some provisions. They've been out there for some time. So he says, David, come on in from the sheep herd, and I'm going to send you. He is the youngest of the 8 brothers. He is small of stature. He's not a big guy. He's not an old guy. He's not a mature guy. But he's being asked by his father to go to war and go to the battlefield at least and go and give some provisions. So he gets there. Let's jump down to verse 21. In verse 21, for Israel and the Philistines had put the battle in array, army against army. So he comes on this site where they're on one side, they're on the other. Verse 22, and David left his carriage in the hand of the keeper of the carriage and ran into the army and came and saluted his brothers. And as he talked with them, behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, and of the armies of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words, and David heard them. Now, this is the first time David's heard them. The other ones have been hearing them every single day, over and over and over. And every time they heard it, what did they do? Not me. I am not going to do that. I'm not going down there. But David, the very first time he hears it, what's his thought? Who's this guy? Who's this guy? What, are you kidding me? Did he say in his heart, oh, nobody can take on that guy? Did he care how big he was? Did he care what his armament was? Did he care what his weapons were? Did he care anything about him? All he heard was he was challenging the people of Israel. And the people of Israel were the people of who? Of God. In fact, verse 24, and all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were sore afraid. This is what David sees. And the men of Israel said, have you seen this man that has come up? Surely to defy Israel he has come up. And it shall be that the man who killeth him, the king will enrich him with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel. He's even given out a bounty. He's trying to encourage people. Yet they said what? There is no hope. I don't care what you give me. I don't care what you give my family in my death. I don't care what the bounty is. There's no hope. There's no way to win. And they just kept running in fear. But David, verse 26, and David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, what shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine and taketh away the reproach from Israel? What's his mindset? This guy could be killed. Theirs is, there's no way to win. His is, so what happens to the person who kills him? Not the one who fights him, the one who kills him. It's a different attitude, isn't it? He sees it as, this will be done. For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? He had a right perspective on the enemy, didn't he? Who did the Philistine worship? Nobody. A nobody. A nothing. So what if he's big? We are the army of who? Of God. So what do we get if we kill him? No big deal. Now, some heard that, verse 27. And the people answered him after this manner, saying, so shall it be done to the man that killed them. The rest of them were like, here's what he gets. But his brother, verse 28, and Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spake unto the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David. And he said, why camest thou down hither? Why are you here? And with whom hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? Get back to your job. Who sent you here? I know thy pride and the naughtiness of thine heart, for thou art come down that thou mightest see the battle. I know why you're here. And this is what people do, don't they? There's no way we can win. There is no hope. If somebody even dares to say there is hope, what's their response? Shut up. Shut your mouth. Go away. You are nothing. You're just letting pride. And he basically attacks his very person, attacks his heart, attacks his purpose. And that will happen sometimes, won't it? When everybody else thinks there's no way to win, and you stand up and say, with the Lord I can win, what do they may say? Oh, you're just a fool. Just be quiet and go away. Stop causing problems here. In fact, his other brother echoed it. And David said, what have I done? And is there not a cause? And he turned from him toward another, and spake after the same manner, and the people answered him again after the former manner. And everybody starts ganging up on him. Be quiet. Don't say that. Why are you saying that? But is David right? Is there hope in God? Can we meet the challenge? No matter what it is, no matter who it is. So then, verse 31. Saul hears about it. And when the words were heard, I keep saying heard, were heard, which David spake, they rehearsed them before Saul, and he sent for him. And David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of this man. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. You guys can all be afraid, but I'm going. And he got great support from his king, didn't he? What did the king say? And Saul said to David, thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. And that's the third thing they'll say, won't it? You can't. And they'll come with all kinds of excuses why you can't win. They're too strong, you're too weak. There is no way you can win. Now, if you're David and you're smart math, what do you say? Well, you're big. You take him. You've been a man of war since your youth. Why don't you take him? No, but he doesn't say that because he's a nice guy. Instead, he says this, and this is what we need to get. When people say, don't even try. When they say, just keep your mouth shut and go away. When they say, you can't do it, you need to remember the facts. And that's what David does. And what are the facts? First of all, let's remember one little fact here. Let's go to 1 Samuel chapter 16. Now, we've been in chapter 17. Where is 16? Before or after? Before. This actually did happen before he went to fight Goliath. Before he even went to fight Goliath, what had God already done through the prophet Samuel? Anointed him to be the next king. In fact, let's look starting in verse 5 of 1 Samuel chapter 16. And Samuel said, I come peaceably. I am come to sacrifice, and the Lord, sanctify yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice. And he sanctified Jesse and his sons and called them to the sacrifice. So Samuel comes to this little town of Bethlehem as directed by God to anoint the next king. And of course, Jesse's like, why are you here? And frankly, if you knew Samuel and things he did, that's a good question. You here because we did something wrong, or you did something because we did something right? Why are you here? And he's like, oh, it's okay. I'm here to come and give a sacrifice, which he was, verse 6. And it came to pass when they were come that he looked on who? Eliab. Remember Eliab? What did he tell David at the battlefront? Be quiet. Well, I know your heart. I know you're a little punk. I know you're here just to kind of see the battle and be all this and that. So this is the one. He is the first one he comes to because he's the oldest. And he said, surely the Lord's anointed is before him. Because Eliab was a man of war, wasn't he? He was a man. And he looked like a king, right? But does God always look on the outside? No. Verse 7, but the Lord said unto Samuel, look not on his countenance or on his height of his stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord seeth not as a man seeth. For a man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. Then Jesse called Abinadab and made him pass before Samuel. And he said, neither hath the Lord chosen this. Then Jesse made Shammah to pass by, and he said, neither hath the Lord chosen this. And again Jesse made 7 of his sons to pass before Samuel, and Samuel said unto Jesse, the Lord hath not chosen these. How many sons did he have? 8. And who wasn't there? David, because he was out tending the sheep. Verse 11. And Samuel said unto Jesse, these are here all thy children? And he said, there remaineth yet the youngest, and behold, he keeps the sheep. And Samuel said unto Jesse, send and fetch him, for we will not sit down till he come hither. And he sent and brought him in. Now he was ruddy. Ruddy. That's why when you get a picture of Jesus, you should picture Jesus maybe with some red hair. Just think about that. Okay? And withal a beautiful countenance, and goodly to look to. And the Lord said, arise, anoint him, for this is he. Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brothers. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. So Samuel rose up and went to Ramah. We need to keep in mind that David had already been anointed the next king of Israel. God already said, I have a plan for you. So when he comes to war and he says, I can take him, what should his brothers have said? Hey, you're the next king. Sure, God must have a great plan for you. Let's go for it. But they forgot that, didn't they? They still saw him as a little runt kid, right? Full of mischief and wonder, right? How did God see David? As a king, a man after God's own heart. That's how he saw David. And I want to point this out because we have to remember who we are. When we look at the challenges before us and we look at the things that we have to overcome and we say, I can't win, you have to remember who you are. How many here have been anointed king? Not of Israel. None of us have been anointed king of Israel. But are we royalty? Are we priests? Are we the children of God? Are we to inherit eternal life? We are his. So if he's put a challenge before us, is he expecting us to lose? No, because we're the children of God, right? And he has a plan for us. So we ought to face that challenge like David said, like David did. Hey, I'm the king. God's got a plan. Let's do it. It's a lot like Joseph. Joseph really went through his life the same way. It didn't matter what he faced because he remembered what? God has already said, I will be a ruler. And God's got great plans for us, doesn't he? And we need to remember that. We need to remember who we are in God, right? And then we got to remember this. Let's go to 1 Samuel chapter 17 again. Not only remember who we are in God, but remember also what God has already done in our life. How many challenges have you already won? How many challenges that could never possibly be won have you already won? And that's what he points out. Look at verse 34 of chapter 17. And David said unto Saul, after Saul had said, you can't do it. You're just a youth. He said, thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. And I went out after him, and smote him, and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard, and smote him, and slew him. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God. He says, hey, yeah, I'm young. Yes, I'm small, but God has already used me to take out a lion and a bear. Let me ask you, how many of you today would say, I'll take out the lion and the bear? I'm not fighting that either. I'm not fighting Goliath. I'm not fighting the lion and the bear either, right? But he had already defeated the undefeatable. As a young kid, he had saved his flock and took a lamb out of the guy's mouth even. And here's the important part, verse 37. And David said, moreover, the Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said unto David, go, and the Lord be with you. I know what God has done, and it is God. It isn't me. Don't think for a moment, look what I've done in the past, therefore I can do it again. He doesn't think that way, does he? He says, God has delivered me. God has given me the ability. He's been where they have said, you can't win, I have won because God. And by the way, if he's done in the past, can he do it again? And is he with us again? And he says, we will win. So, remember the facts. Remember who you are. Remember what God has done in defeating all those obstacles before. When you shouldn't have won, you have, haven't you? Remember what God has done. So, first of all, some do's and don'ts, okay, as we're getting ready for battle now. He's got support of the king. In fact, the king says, I've got a great idea. Let's get you some armor. And let's start that in verse 38. And Saul armed David with his armor, and he put on the helmet of brass upon his head. Also he armed him with a coat of mail, and that's just like a chain link type jacket. And David girded his sword about his armor, and he essayed to go, for he had not proved it. And David said unto Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them. And David put them off him. Now proved them, he said, I haven't tested these. I have never gone to battle with chainmail on. I have never gone with this sword. I've never gone with this helmet. And if you think about it for a minute, if Saul was head and shoulders above everybody else, how much bigger than David was he? And that probably would have been a little cumbersome, right? But even then, he's like, I'm not going to do this. And we have to remember, don't go to fight the world's way, right? Don't sit there and say, okay, I can win with God's help. Now let me figure out how I'm going to do that. Have you ever done that? I know I can win with God's help, so let's get a good plan together. What's the problem? My plan. Let God not only give you the power, but let Him also give you the plan, right? The way to accomplish that. Saul was trying to be helpful, but he was doing it his way. He was doing it the way the world would normally do it. And what did David say? I haven't tested this way. I'm just going to do it the way God has always used me in the past. And how had he overcome the bear and the lion? Slingshot. No chainmail or anything. If God has delivered me that way before, He'll deliver me that way again. So don't do it the world's way. Don't do it your way. Do it whose way? Verse 40. And he took his staff in his hand and chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook and put them in a shepherd's bag which he had, even a scrip, and his sling was in his hand, and he drew near the Philistine. Do it whose way? God's way. Not your way, not the world's way. Do it your way. Do it God's way, right? And God will see you through. Also, don't, verse 41. And the Philistine came out and drew near unto David, and the man that bare the shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about, he saw David. He disdained him, for he was but a youth and ruddy and of a fair countenance. And the Philistine said unto David, Am I a dog that thou comest to me with staves? Because he still had that staff too. And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, Come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air and to the beasts of the field. Do not be intimidated by the words of the enemy. How often are we as Christians sometimes intimidated by the words? They sound so great, don't they? They rattle and they sit there and they boastful and we're going to do this and we're going to destroy you. Should we be scared of what they say? Don't be scared of their size. Don't be scared of their weapons. Don't be scared of their words. Don't worry about it. Was David scared? This big giant, fee, fi, fo, fum? No. Grind your bones to make my meal. Wasn't scared of him at all, was he? Instead, what should we do? Verse 44. Verse 45, we'll start there. Then said David to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. Don't be intimidated by their words. Tell them the truth. Is truth more important? It doesn't matter what they say. What's the truth? Truth is, I am here in the name of God. And you are defying the truth. You are defying God. Therefore what? Verse 46. David's got some serious trash talk mojo here. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee and take thine head from thee. And I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And all his assembly shall know that the Lord saves not with the sword and with the spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. That's serious trash talk, isn't it? I am going to separate your head from your body. And the fowls of the air are going to come and eat the carcasses of all the hosts of the Philistines this day. Where does he get so bold? Because who's on his side? The battle is the Lord's. Can we be confident in the Lord? Don't be confident in yourself, your abilities, but can we be confident in the Lord? And it doesn't matter how big they are or strong they are, can we be confident that the Lord has his way? If it is his will, he will win. We will win. And there'll be no question about it. Well, that just made him mad, didn't it? So what was the results? Verse 48, you know the story. You know exactly what happens. Verse 48. And it came to pass when the Philistine arose and came and drew nigh to David, that David hasted and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. I like that. Sometimes you get this picture of the Philistine like getting mad and running at David, but who's also running? David's not running away. He's running at him. Now, how many have ever shot a slingshot before, especially one of those kind with two straps? I can't imagine running and doing that, but David was skilled, wasn't he? Verse 49, and then David put his hand in his bag and took thence a stone and slang it, and smote the Philistine in his forehead. And the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth. It's one of the few places he could have hit him and done any damage. What would have hit him in the chest? Would have been chainmail. Hit him in the top of the head. Would have been a helmet. Shield guy's there somewhere, right? But hit him right smack dab in the middle of the forehead. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and smote the Philistine and slew him. How many times can you say, he killed him, right? And there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood upon the Philistine and took his sword and drew it out of the sheath thereof and slew him and cut off his head therewith. And when the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they ran. Now they figured there was no what? No hope. Our champion, and this is the way it often goes, right? The world wants us to make us believe that there is no hope, that we cannot win. But all it takes is a small victory. Somebody, anybody standing up and saying, no, I'm going to trust the Lord. And the smallest victory can make them understand that they are the ones that have no hope. And is that a good thing? Yeah. So what was the result? Victory. Absolute victory. But not only that, look at verse 52. The men of Israel, remember those guys? The ones that were cowering, scared to death. And the men of Israel and of Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines until thou come to the valley and to the gates of Ekron. And the wound of the Philistines fell down by the way of Sha'arim, even unto Gath and unto Ekron. And the children of Israel returned from chasing after the Philistines, and they spoiled their tents. Not only did David get the victory, but it inspired. Isn't that important? When one person stands up and gets the victory with the help of God, it then inspires others to be brave, doesn't it? And then they were able to have complete victory over the Philistines. Now, I like how this story ends, because King Saul sees all of this, and he has a question. Now, keep in mind, does Saul know David? Oh, he's been working with him. He's been in his palace. To him, though, he's just what? He's just that young kid. Just that young kid that comes in and plays the instrument and stuff like that. He's just one of those guys around the palace, right? But look what King Saul wants to know. Verse 57. And as David returned from the slaughter of the Philistines, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistines in his hand. It's kind of gross. Plus, it was huge. I was going to be like carrying it. I don't know how he's doing that. Verse 58, and Saul said to him, whose son art thou, thou young man? And David answered, I am the son of thy servant Jesse the Bethlehemite. It's like, who are you? You must be somebody of importance, right? You must be from a family of great importance. You must be, what are you, the great-grandson of Samson or something? To have that kind of bravery, to go out and do that. Your father must be a great soldier or a line of soldiers, right? Who is David? Just the youngest son of a nobody named Jesse from a backwater sheep town known as Bethlehem. What can we take from that? Kind of like the story this morning with Elijah, right? Doesn't matter our background. It just matters if we're willing to stand up and say, I will try. I'm not going to just keep my mouth shut and walk away. With the Lord's help, I can what? I can do this. And then He will give us the victory, right? Is there hope in the face of any challenge? In the face of any enemy? In the face of anything, is there hope with God? And if you're like David, who puts his trust completely in God, looks back over his life and sees how many times the Lord has been there with him, understands that God's got a great purpose for his life, that he's a child of God, and puts their trust in God, is there anything we can't do? No. No, there's not. And by doing it, what did he do? He inspired a nation, didn't he? Now, Saul's not going to like that later on, but still, he can inspire a nation, can't he? And can we do the same thing? Yes, we can.